So what we have in front of us is our unleveled Gantt chart. What I mean by unleveled is that we have the critical path method and we have the floating tasks. Floating tasks underneath the critical path have been plotted in accordance with the CAN number, basically meaning that they've been placed as soon as possible that they can actually be delivered in the works program based on their dependencies. And as you can see, if you look down on day 2, you'll actually identify that there is one task in the critical path being completed, along with another task, activity B, and activity D, and also activity E. So if we were actually to count up all the resources within those tasks, we'd have a lot of people on site on those days. Now this would be okay if we're not subjected to resource issues or requirements. So if it's acceptable to have multiple teams on the same day, potentially this would be no risk. However, what we can do is actually level this works program out by sliding and shuffling the floating task to try and balance out the amount of utilisation for workers. So we're about to do that next. First step in levelling off your Gantt chart is to understand what your current resource levels are sitting at the moment. So to do that, we need to work out and calculate the total number of resources for each activity. So using your Excel information, so your tab data, we can first populate the information for the first activities. So initially, I'm going to type in the resources, carpenter, plumber, electrician, labour, and our total. So I'm going to transcribe those across here. Carpenter, plumber, electrician, labour, and total. So we're going to first of all transcribe that information off your worksheet. So we're going to have 2, 1, correction, 1, 1, 1, 2, for a total of 6. So what we're saying is that activity 1 when you look across from left to right, it has identified that for that one activity we have 6 people. So that one task requires 6 people in total to be able to complete the task. And that consists of 2 carpenters, 1 plumber, 1 electrician, and 2 labourers. So we're going to go out and populate the rest of the activities, and then we'll move to the next stage. So once we've populated the total resources, as you can see, we have our totals. That clearly identifies the total number of people for each activity on the line item. So if I go down to basically task 7, I can see that for that one activity, there's 1 person required for that activity, and that's 1 plumber. So that's on each activity, it gives me the totals. So that's that section here. If I come down the bottom though, I can actually then determine the total number of people for the day based on the number of tasks that's there. So task 1, as you can see, there's nothing below that. So there's only 1 task happening on day 1. So the numbers are going to be pretty much the same. So I'm still going to have 2 carpenters, 1 plumber, 1 electrician, have 2 labourer for a total of 6. And that reflects that direction. No boxes there, 1 there, same carries across. However, on day 2, this is where it changes. As you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tasks. So on day 2, I've got task C happening. So far I've got one carpenter, I've got one labourer, and that's it for task C. Task B, I've got another carpenter, so that's now 2, and I've got another labourer, so that's now 2. Task D, I've got one carpenter, so that's now 3, and I've also got another labourer, so that's now 3. Task E, I've got one plumber and one electrician. So now when I tally it up, it gives me a total of 8. And I'll keep carrying across, calculating the same method to determine all the resources. So again, knowing that you can see that on day 3, there's no other extra activities. So that's going to be the same. 3, 1, 1, 3, and 8, because there's no change. However, when it comes to day 4, task B has now finished. So when I calculate that, I've got one carpenter and one labourer. So one carpenter, one labourer. No task B, but down here I've got task D, which is a carpenter and labourer, 1 and 1. So now that makes it 2 and 2. Down here I've got a task E, which is a plumber and electrician, so 1 and 1. So now I've got a total of 4, 6. And again, we get changes. So now I'm going to keep populating that, and I'll get you to do the same, and we'll go through the next stage. I've now pre-populated all the remaining tables, and you can see now that I've actually got all my totals. If we go back to the right hand side, you can see the number of resources per item, per task. So for example, as we said before, task F has 2 people involved, 1 carpenter and 1 labourer. Down below you can actually see where there's overlapping tasks on the same day. We get the full totals of the resources for that allocation for that day. This is called unleveled. As you can see, we have high numbers of resources for the first 5 days, and then it starts to plateau off and we get some small numbers. So for some of the days we've actually got 2s and 3s. Again, this could be acceptable if you want to put all your resources up front. However, what we can do is we can actually move these floating tasks to try and balance out the loading on your work task. What that means is that the task duration will not change. So the 15 days will still not be exceeded. However, we'll be reducing where our people are working. So by sliding these floating tasks, mainly trying to move them where they're not overlapping, where there's space, we can actually reduce these numbers down. So the next process will be to slide and move these floating tasks, and then to recalculate this process and determine your resource allocation. So by sliding these and avoiding the overlapping, we should be able to reduce our big numbers of staff on the one day and hopefully have a more consistent, even level of staffing. And by doing that, we'll be leveling off the actual Gantt chart, and that's the process of leveling. So I'm going to slide these next, and you'll see that the next video we'll have these moved, and then we'll go through the recalculation process. So the next phase is to recalculate now once we've leveled it off. As you can see, I have moved the floating tasks so they're not overlapping, and I'll go through the recalculation process to determine the resources. You can also see task A, there's nothing changed there due to the dependency, so that hasn't changed. So it's still 2 carpenters, 1 plumber, 1 electrician, 2 labourer, which gives me a total of 6. So I'm going to go through now and calculate the remaining. As you can see, task C still got 1 carpenter, 1 labourer. This task here is still 1 carpenter, 1 labourer, so that now changes to 2 and 2. We've still got, I've got task E there, which is 1 plumber and 1 electrician. That gives me a total of 6. That hasn't changed for the next line item, so it'll still be 2, 1, 1, 2, and 6. I have moved task D, as you can see, so I'll get a different number here. So I've still got 1 carpenter and 1 plumber. So 1, 1 labourer, correction. Come down to task E, and I've got 1 plumber and 1 electrician. Total of 4. So I'll continue that on until I get my new totals. As you can see, we've got our new totals. Now if I compare that against our original, you'll see our original totals. As you can see, on the first day there's no difference. But as you can see, originally we had 8, so now we've actually have a reduction in 2 people. And the same again for this day. And as you can see, we've actually made quite a significant reduction in the original tallies. Go through. So overall, what we've actually done, we haven't changed the time frame, but what we actually have done, as you can see, the totals, we've got 6 people for the first day and second day, third day, where originally we had up to 8 staff members. As you can have a look at some of the key resources in regards to carpenters, we would have quite extensive number of those trades utilised. So by levelling it off, the shaded boxes, you can actually see we've got a more of a consistent number of staff on site. So if you had a crew of 6 people, you could see that we've predominantly catered for a smaller crew for the whole duration, instead of having a mass number of resources of people on certain days. And that process, by moving those floating tasks and then recalculating that, is a levelling process. We are levelling off your resources. So in comparison to unleveled, basically starting the task as soon as you can, you're having all your resources allocated for those days. What we've done is we've spread it out with those floating tasks to drop the number of total people required on particular days. However, the project time frame has not changed. So that's levelling.